All right, good morning and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about some specific types of parallelograms. So hopefully you remember parallelogram, it's quadrilateral, so a four-sided polygon in which the opposite sides have to be parallel. Okay, we know several things about them. Opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent. We also know that their diagonals bisect and their consecutive interior angles are going to be supplementary or add up to 180. So today we're talking about three different types of parallelograms. And some of these you've probably heard of, but the first one, I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not, but it's a rhombus. And a rhombus is when we have a parallelogram that has four congruent sides. Okay, so if I draw this parallelogram, and I'll do my best. It might not be perfect. That probably should go to about there. Actually, let me redo that last one. So mine's not perfect, but if we there, if each of these sides is congruent, so if I put a mark on each of them, then that is a rhombus. All four sides are going to be congruent. Anytime all four sides are congruent, it is a rhombus. Okay, now our next one. This is a rectangle. And this is when we have four right angles. So in each of these corners, I can put this little right angle symbol. Oops, let me switch back there. I can put a right angle. And each of those is going to be a right angle. Okay, and I'm guessing you've heard of rectangle. Now the last one, square, this is probably the most common shape that we're going to talk about today that you've heard of. So our square, not only are each of the sides congruent. Oops, I forgot. Keep forgetting to switch back to my pen. So 1, 2, 3, 4 sides that are congruent, but also four angles are congruent, and they are each going to be 90 degrees or a right angle. Okay. So if we look here now, it says describing a special parallelogram. The Venn diagram at the right shows the relationship among parallelograms, rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. Okay, each shape has the properties of every group that it belongs to. So, for instance, a square is a rectangle, a rhombus, and a parallelogram. So it has all of the properties of each of these. Okay, so what we're saying is a square is a rhombus because a square has four sides that are congruent, just like a rhombus. It also has four sides that are right angles, just like a rectangle, so that's why it's in both of those. It's also a parallelogram because opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles add up to 180, diagonals would bisect. Meanwhile, a rectangle and a rhombus, those are both parallelograms, but they're not going to be squares because just because it's a rectangle does not mean it has to be a square. Okay? Just because it's a rhombus doesn't mean it has to be a square. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so using these properties, there's only a few. We know if it tells us it's a rhombus, right here, ABCD is a rhombus, find X. If it's a rhombus, we know all the sides are congruent. So I for sure know then that 4x minus 5 is going to equal 2x plus 17. Okay, then we subtract 2x. I'm going to do it all in one step. We'll add the 5 over. We're going to get 2x equals 22. Divide by 2, we get x equals 11. Okay, letter B. This one tells us it's a rectangle. As soon as we see that it's a rectangle, we know this angle is 90 degrees. So 7y plus 6 will equal 90. Subtract the 6, and 7y will equal 84. We can divide by 7, and we will get y to equal, 12. All right, the next one, QRST is a square. If it's a square, once again, we know that all the sides are congruent. So I can just take x plus 27, set it equal to 13 minus 6x. If I add the 6x over, I'll have 7x. Subtract the 27, I'll have minus 14. We'll divide, we'll get x equals negative 2. Now, some of you might instantly see that and go, a negative 2, you can't have a side of negative 2 length. And I agree with that, but let's think if we would plug that back in, negative 2 plus 27, that would be 25. You can have a side that's 25 in length. If I put it over here, negative 2 times negative 6, that's 12. 12 plus 13, 25. So it makes sense. Even though the x value is negative, that doesn't mean the side length is negative. And we're almost done here with this side. The last one, KLMN is a rectangle. Find the values of x and y. Now, x is easy. We know that each of these angles is 90 degrees because it's a rectangle. So 2x minus 10 equals 90. We'll add that 10. We'll get 2x equals 100. Divide, and we'll get x equals 50. However, for y, even though it's a rectangle, that doesn't tell us anything about the lengths of the sides, but we know that means it's a parallelogram, so opposite sides have to be congruent. So 3y plus 21 has to equal the 5y plus 11. Subtract the 11, subtract the 3y, we're left with 10 equals that 2y. We'll divide and we'll get y to equal 5. Now, these are kind of our basic properties of these special parallelograms, the rhombus, the rectangle, and the square. Now we're going to talk about some theorems. Okay, these are things that also have to be true. So, a parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if its diagonals are perpendicular. So what that means is, in order for this to be a rhombus, in order for each of these sides to be the same, that means these diagonals are perpendicular. So not only is there a right angle there, but right here, right here, right here. All four of these angles on the interior, or where it crosses there, where the diagonals cross, those would be right angles. So not necessarily the angles of the shape, but the angles where the diagonals cross. Okay, the second rule. Parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. Meaning the line AC here, this diagonal bisects both angle A and angle C. We already know that A and C were congruent because it's a parallelogram, so if it bisects, then each of those small parts will also be congruent. Likewise, B and D will be bisected. And finally, a parallelogram is a rectangle if and only if its diagonals are congruent. So right here, from D to B is congruent, from A to C is congruent. We already know that a parallelogram, the diagonals bisect, so that means from D to the center, from B to the center are the same as from A to the center and C to the center. All four of those little chunks are the same. So let's use these properties, or these theorems, to help us solve a few problems. So if we look at this first one, if this is a rhombus, then our diagonals bisect the angles. So I know these two will have to be equal. I can just do 8x minus 3 equals 5x plus 6. Subtract the 5x, add the 3. We'll get 3x equals 9, so x will equal 3. Now, if you didn't trust it, you could plug that in here. If I plug that in, 8 times 3, 24 minus 3 is 21. On this side, if I plug it in, 5 times 3, 15 plus 6, 21. If I plug it in here, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 12 is 21. All of those work. Now, this next one, we don't actually really need to use any of the property or the theorems. We can just use our properties. Maybe I shouldn't have had it in this section, but it says the perimeter of a square, MNOP, is 72 inches. And NO is 2x plus 6. What's the value of x? NO, that's one of our sides. So it's up to you. If you want, you can draw your square. You don't have to. The key thing here is to notice that if it's a square, all these have to be the same, which means if we have 72 inches for the perimeter, if we divide that by 4, 18, that is what each of these sides is. So NO is 18. I can set that equal to the 2x plus 6. So I can subtract the 6 over. I'll be left with 12 equals 2x. Divide by 2. X will equal 6. All right. A couple more for us. Letter C here. JKLM is a rhombus. Find X. Now the key thing is if it's a rhombus, we can go up here, look at our properties. The first one. It's a rhombus if and only if its diagonals are perpendicular. So when those cross in the middle, the diagonals cross, they form 4 right angles. So I could put that there, and all 4 of those are right angles. Now, what that means is if we think about this little triangle that's here, there's a right angle. We know that's 50 degrees. We know this is X. Hopefully you remember every triangle, the 3 angles add up to 180. So 50 plus the 90, it's going to be 140. Take 180 minus that 140, and we'll get X to equal 40. All right. On our last one here, no, we got 2 more actually. ABCD is a rectangle. Find X. Good news is if it's a rectangle, we know that the diagonals are congruent. So all the way from D to B is the same as from A to C. A to this middle spot is 10, so D to the middle spot also has to be 10. We don't really even have to do anything, just X equals 10. And our final one, RSTU is a square, find Y. So over here, SU, that diagonal is 6Y. RT, that diagonal is Y plus 5. Now here's the thing, a square, if it's a square, it's also a rectangle and a rhombus. So if it's a rectangle, we know the diagonals are congruent, so these two will have to be congruent to each other. So 6y equals y plus 5. You can minus that y, we'll have 5y equals 5. We divide by 5, we get y equals 1. And we are done. So take a look. There's an It's Learning assignment today. This will be the last new assignment. Tomorrow will kind of be a catch-up day for us, a day to review all this material. But please get this done. Hope you guys have a great day. And if you need anything, let me know. Bye.